Today, like Shade mentioned, we're going to be talking about Texas. There's so many good opportunities. In fact, Shade sent me over a slide that had some of the Texas properties on there that helped me in finding some of these. But Texas is a great state for cash deed investing. In fact, me and Shade have really become fans of it, especially over the last couple of years. They have about 254 different counties in Texas where you can invest in tax deed property.
Yeah, there's a lot of things about Texas that are pretty exciting. So for the longest time, Texas has only held their sales as live auctions. You had to be there in person. And, we attended some of those sales before, but they were difficult to get to. Texas is huge. And, the auctions sometimes are unpredictable, which we've encountered a lot of crazy stuff there in Texas. So when they went to online auctions in Texas, it was huge because it opened up the investment opportunities to everybody else. And what's interesting too is originally when they went to online auctions, I thought that the prices would all be super high. I thought that stuff would be bidding up and that it would be overpriced in a lot of cases. But checking the results of the Texas sales has become like a monthly thing that I like to do because we find crazy examples every single time. We go through and look at Texas properties here. We find examples of properties that have sold, great properties that have sold for a good low percentage of value. Just good deals by any measure. And so, yeah, we're excited to talk about them a little bit today. Texas is a redemption deed state, technically. So what that means is that when you buy the property from Texas, you don't have the ability to immediately sell it. There's going to be a redemption period attached to that. Now, the redemption period on most properties is 6 months, but it can be 24 months or 2 years on homestead properties and certain kinds of farmland. So that's something that we check with every property to see just how long that redemption period is. But if a property does happen to pay off or redeem within that 6 months for most properties, or within the first year on others, then it'll pay a flat 25% rate of return. So even redemption is actually a pretty profitable outcome for the investor. They're going to make 25% on your money without doing anything on it, and that'll happen relatively quickly. If it redeems, it's going to happen there within the first 6 months. So that's a good opportunity by itself. Something else that's unique about Texas is they hold sales, at least they can hold sales as often as once a month. They are scheduled through state law. Basically, the first Tuesday of every month is the date that's set aside for their auctions. And so what's nice about that is if a county has properties to sell, we know when their sale date is going to be scheduled. Now, not all counties hold sales every single month because they do them as often as they need to. And it all depends on whether they have properties to foreclose on or not and to offer up at the tax sale. But there are lots of counties every single month that have, that have properties available in Texas. And so we'll get a chance to go and review some of those.
Yeah, exactly. Like Shade mentioned, there's going to have a 6-month redemption period on any property that is considered non-homestead property, or if it's farmland. Those are the only two type of properties that are going to have a 2-year redemption period.
Yeah, other than that, they are a lot like regular property deeds. Texas also works really well for pre-foreclosures, just like Georgia. Texas and Georgia actually have a lot of similarities in some of the things that they do. So it is kind of like Georgia in that way. But Georgia hasn't moved to a lot of online auctions yet the way that Texas has. So all their sales are still in person. For Texas, I would say that, the majority of their sales are still in person because they have 250 counties, but they probably have about 30 to 35 counties or so that have online opportunities right now. And 2 years ago they had 0. So it's growing. It's coming up pretty fast.
Yeah, exactly. So what we want to do today is we want to go through and look at some auctions that have taken place recently, look at a number of different counties and kind of get a feel of what you can purchase. Today, we're actually going to focus on kind of the higher end, at least on a lot of these properties, because there's really some really nice homes that are being sold in the Texas tax sale. So the first one, we're going to look at this one right here that ended up selling for $83,000. We can see what it opened up at. It opened up at 10,000, ended up selling for 83, and has a county assessed value of about 245,000.
Yeah, in fact, one of the first things we usually do with these is we pull up the property on Google Maps so we can just see what it is. That's generally going to be the fastest way to try to figure out what the property is. And in this case, we've got a street side image of a home from April of 2023. So it's a few years old, but it's not too old. If we're looking at the house itself, it looks like a house was maybe built in the 70s or 80s. It has a metal roof on it, so it's been updated here in part. It looks like it was occupied at the time that the image was taken.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it looks like it's an all brick home. Really, in cleaning up this yard, making the landscaping better, and this could be a great property to rehab and really actually bring up the value. I think even more than the assessed value or even what the market value is. It's within a nice area, but you can see how just based on the brick and everything, if you were to really clean up this yard, this would be a great looking property.
Is that a new construction across the street? That kind of looked like it was new. Oh yeah, look at
Yeah.
that. A brand new house across the street. It would definitely go up in value here. And it's pegged to go up in value if you were to make some of those changes because yeah, that's a nice nice new valuable property. Those are nice homes. These are it's a nice neighborhood and community. These are $300,000 houses.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So as far as what, Redfin is valuing it at, they are valuing it around 242. So kind of similar to what the county's valued it at. It's probably worth about 250,000. So they paid up for it, but they paid up for a brick home that was fairly new, built in 1979. So they're not going to have to worry about things like lead paint. Nice brick home, Rambler, that could be a really desirable home for a rehab type project.
Well, and ultimately they paid 1/3 for it. So they paid 33% roughly. I mean, thinking $80,000, $240,000 value. I mean, yeah, they paid 33% for the property, which leaves a lot of room to fix it up. It's a good percentage of value to get it for. I mean, they probably could have paid up to 40% of value, and it would still have made sense. At 33% of value, they really got a steal.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and one thing that's kind of interesting, you can see property here. This one opened up at 5 grand. Had a value of 30 grand, and maybe this is a lot, but it struck off to the county. So nobody even bid it on that particular property. But the one that we're going to look at is this one right here. It opened up for 20,000 and it pretty much sold for close to the opening bid amount. Maybe a couple of bids.
Yeah, in fact, it looks like yeah, it's only $500 over, the opening bid amount. It might have even been the opening bid or somebody just, threw that bid out there, or it could have been the person that went up on the opening bid. We've got an image from September of 2013. So about 12, 13 years old here on the image. It looks like it's a rural property here.
Yeah, it's not necessarily in the best condition. We need to get an on-site evaluation, but picking it up for 20 grand, valued at 153,000. Well, there's some good profit margin in there that even if it did need to be repaired, would check the market a little bit more, and it might be a little bit harder to determine. But I would think that this investor that did buy it, knowing that that could be the potential value at 20 grand, it could be worth picking up at that price.
Well, even if it was in rough shape and they wanted to just unload it, they could sell it for 50,000 and walk away pretty quick. You've got so many options when you pay that low of a price, and even at 50,000, they would more than double their money. So yeah, a great purchase here. And if they did want to fix it up, then their profitability, they could earn upwards of 100,000 plus on it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The next property we're going to look at is this one right here that ended up selling for 127,000. It opened up at 57,000, has an assessed value of 319,000. And
Yes.
really, this is in fact, I'm going to go ahead and look at the overhead first.
Yeah, this is an amazing house. There's interior images of this too.
Yeah. So it's this big home right here, located right here on the river. You can see that this is from March 2024. and you can see it's a pretty big all brick home, and looking at the yard, it does look like we can see vehicles over here, so maybe it's still being occupied here back in 2024. But you can see how, again, talking a little bit about landscaping, the view of the home, getting it rehabbed, how this could be pretty interesting. In fact, Shade was right. In fact, there's two different sets of pictures. On Zillow, you can see these photos here, which we see, you know, kind of what the interior looked like back when it was sold last.
Yeah, so these images are probably 15 years old, I would guess. They could be older than that even as well. I don't know. But yeah, what is handy is that, yeah, we've got these images, and then we have on Redfin, we have the images of the property as it sits right now. And so we can get a much better idea of exactly what the condition is, much better pictures of the property. And what they picked this property up for 127, I think, is
Yeah.
the amount that they paid here. And it's a beautiful property. I mean, it's a 5,000 square foot house. It's a big house, 5-bedroom, 3.5 bath. And it is going to need certain things. Like, for instance, that back wall, I think they've got that knocked out. And we see that the standing shower that they had in there has been pulled out as well in the basement. They've removed that. It looks like it may have had some kind of a draining issue or something, because they've got it kind of all broken up here, the concrete anyway. But the rest of the house, I mean, it's dry. It's the condition on it, it looks like like somebody may have started some kind of a remodel and started to do work on it, because certainly it needs some remodel work, but it could also, I think, with the remodel work done, the value on it would probably be even higher.
Yeah, well, and that's really where you'd need to look into it, because, I think that this is low. I mean, we can see this is almost 5,000 square feet, 5-bedroom, essentially 3.5 bath. And this was a property that sold pretty close to it, sold for 425,000, kind of similar year, similar build, but it's only 3,000 square feet. And so when
Yeah.
I was looking at some of the other homes within the area that were this size, that were kind of this style, they were $500,000 to $600,000. So I think that it's been underassessed, and that may have to do with some of the recent sales. Maybe the last time it sold, when this person bought it in this condition before it went to the tax sale,
What
maybe
year is
they.
it built? For some reason, I can't remember that. It's 1970. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's sitting on 2 acres. It's sitting on a nice big lot of land. Yeah. Oh, and also the county's adjudged value on it is even higher than what. Yeah, they're saying it's like 319. There definitely one where it would be a big rehab, but this is the kind of rehab project a lot of people would just love to go after. Because it is kind of a nicer home here, built in 1970, hasn't gone through a major renovation since. Much of the house you wouldn't have to really do much with at all. Maybe some basic stuff there with paint, but the floors look pretty good. And again, not too many problems in a lot of the house, but other parts of the house are obviously going to need a lot of construction work, to be done with it. But yeah, I think the value, like Steve is showing here, I think the value would go up dramatically, because if you renovated this property at 5,000 square feet, yeah, there's no reason why it wouldn't be selling at that same level that these other properties are, 400,000 plus.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's kind of interesting when you see some of these struck off properties here. Here's one opened up for 189,000, valued at 670. And I don't know what it is, but it is kind of interesting to see some of those properties. We're going to look at this one here that opened up at 58,000 and sold to the third party, to essentially the tax deed investor for that opening bid amount.
Yeah, opening bid amount on these. So you're getting properties for basically the lowest amount you possibly can at 58,000. And yeah, we'll see what the value is on it. For properties in this value range, though, it's going to be hard to do better than this. Yeah, they picked it up for a third of value, so they paid 33% of value for it, roughly, and that's about as good as you can hope for with a property like this. There's plenty of profitability in it. It's not that big, 943 square feet, very simple design, so it would also be pretty easy to fix up if there are repairs or things that are needed on it.
Yeah. Yeah, not a bad deal. Well, and it was picked up for the opening bid amount, so there wasn't a whole lot of competition on it. This next one's pretty interesting as well, and it opened up for 19,000, has an assessed value of 428,000, and it ended up selling for just 101,000.
Yeah, so it bid up a little bit, bid up from, from 20,000 up to about 100,000, but being valued at 400,000 according to the county, they paid a very low percentage of value for it. Oh yeah, it's a house right there.
Yeah, so it's this one, and then here's some of the interior photos of it. I'm
Oh,
not
that's
quite
great.
I don't know, I'm not quite sure how this ended up in the tax sale and didn't get more bids on it, but
Is it a new construction?
it was built in 2018.
So pretty new.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2,800 square feet, 5 bedroom, 3 bath. I don't know how this property sold for 100,000. That is a screaming deal.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, you look in there,
Yeah, that would make sense. That I mean, I'm sure they would want to redeem that one because redeeming it would be so much cheaper than losing that property.
yeah, yeah. Well, if you picked it up, it may be one of those ones that somebody makes a 25% on their money on.
Yeah, which again, for the 100,000 you pay for it, you're going to make 25,000 on it, and you would make that pretty quick here. In the first 6 months of the investment. So yeah, redemption could definitely be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, even just looking at that bid to value ratio, even if we just say it's worth what the county is, you're still looking at about 25 cents, under 25 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, which that's as good as you're going to find for improved properties anywhere in the country. Just an excellent deal.
Yeah, here's another one. Ended up opening up at 52, sold for 142. The county is assessed it at 354,000. And this one's kind of interesting because it's, kind of like a condo type unit.
Yeah, yeah, it is a condo. In fact, it has there's a dumpster in front of it, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I was trying to see that myself. But go to this one or the one next to it. You can see it's pretty new, 2025. The county's valuing it at, close to 400,000.
So they're built in. It's pretty big too. 2,300 square feet is pretty big for a townhouse.
Yeah, and looking at the others, I think it's 4 bedroom, 2 bath. It could be 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and just kind of quickly checking some of the other ones around it.
Holy cow, though, for what they paid, 140,000 was what they paid, I think. Is it right? Yeah, well, yeah, 142 for what they've paid there. I mean, they're into it less than 50% on a nice, I mean, a condo that is being lived in, right now, and they got it for well under 50%. They got it for about 40% of value. That was a good buy.
Yeah, any of these properties that we're showing you that uh, that are newer like this, and that have higher values. All of these deals that we've been looking at, with the exception of maybe some of the cheaper homes, have the opportunity to make at least $100,000 on a deal. And if you can make $100,000 on a deal on a property that's valued at 300 or 400,000, that's a pretty good return on your money when we're talking about real estate investing terms. In fact, that's more than you're going to be able to do by doing wholesale deals or anything like that. And so that's kind of the big advantage to tax sales, is that we can pick up property for cheaper. Now, newer, nicer properties like this, you may pay up for, but if you're paying 30 to 40 cents on the dollar on these, and in this case, a condo, we're not going to be worried about the roof. We're not going to be worrying about the foundation. The only thing we need to worry about is the interior, which is probably not going to be too bad. I mean, of course, it could be bad, but it's not going to have the same type of damage as going into an old house. Because if there was water damage or something like that, it would be affecting the neighbors, and there'd be something more going on.
Yeah, that is the one benefit that we have with something like a condo, where there's shared infrastructure, where there's shared building that is there for the value of that property in that price range. Yeah, that's about as good a profit as you can hope for on these deals. I mean, you could make at least 100,000 on these properties at the prices that they've been purchased at, and in some cases, you could probably do better than that.
Yeah, here's another type of property, kind of like the last that we one we looked at. Opened up at 49. has a value of 75. I mean, ended up selling for 75,000. The market value is only 125,000, but it's actually quite a bit higher than that. What the actual market value versus the assessed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the market on it puts it actually closer to 240,000.
Yeah, it's 3 bedroom, 2 bath. About just over 2,000 square feet, and it's located kind of here within the end of this cul-de-sac in one of these twin home type style.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so this is the one that bid up to 75.
Yeah, and I'm selling at 75,000, valued at about 240,000.
That is just not very much. Again, they got that for less than a third of value. Let's
Yeah,
see, right about a third of value, I suppose, is about what they paid. Again, the numbers are really hard to beat. And this is, again, a newer property that, well, I don't know if it's newer, but it looks like it's in pretty good shape, like it's being lived in currently, or that it's usable right now. Yeah, that's pretty good.
yeah. This next property. Let me see.
You know,
Maybe.
and,
Oh, it's
and
right here.
by the way, all of these examples that we're pulling are from different auctions that different Texas sales that took place in either March or April. And so these are sales that just barely happened, and opportunities there throughout some of the counties. These are just the ones that have their auction set up on Real Auction that we're looking at.
Yeah, we probably looked at 3 or 4 different counties as we've gone through, and there's been other good deals on here that we just kind of left out. We were just kind of picking some of the ones that are a little bit newer, that still were picked up at a good bid for value ratio. So this one sold for 40, opened at 40,000, sold for 110, and has an assessed value of 228,000. And it's this property right here.
Oh, it's a perfect tax sale property. Look at that.
Yeah, nice neighborhood, you know, really, I mean, you can see how everyone's home is upkept. This is really the only home on the street that we can see, hasn't been cut in a while. Photo was back in May 2025.
Oh, this would be an awesome rental. This would be such a good rental. I bet the rental estimate on is pretty high, like 17 or 1,800 bucks.
Yeah, yeah, definitely at least that. Well, and one thing that was interesting is I was looking at the assessed value. I was like, man, that's pretty low, for a house of this quality in this area. And in looking at some of the comps, this is the cheapest one on the entire street that Redfin is valued. These are properties that have sold within a block or two of it that are pretty close to the same size, 3 bedroom, 2 bath. So this one sold for 265. This one sold for 279,
Oh
and this one
yeah,
sold for 274. So I
yeah,
think it's valued at least 250 to 270 once you got it cleaned up and remarketed.
yeah. That would make perfect sense there. Certainly, there's more profitability in it there from 200,000 or wherever it is that they're at. And paying 110,000 for it, really, they're so they did pay up. I mean, they paid up to get this property here. And if you were to look at it, you could say, well, they paid up almost 50% of what the county's adjudged value is. But the property is new enough here, it's going to be easy enough to fix up that it's a pretty good deal. And like Steve is showing here, its value is also probably 50,000 over what the county is estimating here, especially post repair. It would be that. So there is room to move here on it. There's still $100,000 of potential profitability, in a deal like this, and ones like this work out really well for long-term rentals.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely think you could make over 100 grand. You put 50 grand into rehabbing the property, you sell it for around 350, a completely rehab property. And one thing that was unique within that area is there was a ton of homes selling. Like, I mean, when I put in even a year, the whole neighborhood looked like it was full of properties that had sold. So this is a hot market where property is moving, and was definitely, probably worth being picked up at that price, and could still make, close to, um, 100,000 on at least.
One of the questions that we get sometimes is, what does it mean when it says, pulled to repost at a later date? Or, we can see here, like, yeah, pulled to repost at a later date, and some of those that paid prior to sale. It doesn't take that much to throw the property into an additional auction or another auction on a different date. And, I'm not sure exactly what the issue is. I know that I've seen them do this before. I've seen them do this before with sales that didn't work out. So I don't know if they had it posted like this before the sale happened, or if this is something that they were doing here, they posted a later date before the auction took place. But I have seen counties before that have reposted sales to later dates so that they can still offer them up in tax sales. Most of these, though, are probably pulled because they're either paid for or something changed.
Sometimes it's because they've worked out an agreement to say, we're going to come in by a certain date and pay it. And so they pulled it to see if they pay it. And if they don't pay it after a certain period of time, then they'll go ahead and relist it. So it's kind of the homeowner or the property owner saying, I know I haven't paid it yet, but I promised to pay it by this date. And so because of that, it just makes better sense for them to try to pull the property, then go ahead and auction it off and have to deal with any ramifications. If they went ahead and totally redeemed it, then many times we'll see the paid prior to the sale.
Yeah, and anything that doesn't sell technically is supposed to go, it's supposed to be struck off is the way that Texas says it, and they do have resales. So they have both struck off properties in many counties, meaning some over-the-counter inventory in some counties where you can submit offers on it. But a lot of the counties will conduct resales. So when they're conducting an auction, they'll offer up their auction properties first, and then they'll offer their resale properties kind of mixed in with that.
Yeah, well, and we're going to look at this property right here, but you can see even this one here, opened up at 60, sold for 78, has an assessed value of 214. We're going to look at this one here that has a value of 317,000 through the county, opened up at 30 and ended up selling for 112,000.
Yeah, let's check it out. Oh, and by the way, how long is the foreclosure action after the redemption process? What is the general cost? That's a great question. So one of the things that's beneficial about the way that redemption deeds in Texas work is the foreclosure has essentially already been done prior to the auction happening. And so we don't actually have to pay anything for foreclosure. It's just the time period that we are waiting out. And so all we really have to do is just wait out the time period here. And after that time period, the county will record the deed and will send the deed to us. And so we don't really have to do anything to get the deed if once the redemption period has expired. Unlike in Georgia, we would. Georgia's a little bit different where you have to kind of foreclose on their right to redeem, but not in Texas. In Texas, we don't have to foreclose on their right to redeem the property or anything. We just would get the deed, in the mail and could begin selling the property. We can also take possessive rights of the property immediately. So immediately following the sale, we can take possession rights of the property because they offered that as well. A quiet title. So yes, if the property goes through the auction, though, it will be a clouded title, and so you would still want to either pursue a quiet title action or get it tax title certified, with somebody like Tax Title Services.
Yeah, exactly. So, as far as this property here, you can see it's a kind
nice.
of a newer brick home, fewer years old. In fact, I think it was a little bit newer. Right here's from 2023. Was still being occupied at the time.
It's in great shape, though. We can see the roof looks perfect on it. It's been cared for. I mean, it may not have gone through some kind of a recent remodel, but whoever is living there is caring for the property pretty well.
Yeah, and I believe that Redfin has underassessed it. And part of the reason sometimes this happens is if they don't have enough information, like here we don't have the bedrooms, they'll go ahead and dock it down. And so if this is a 3-bedroom, this would bring the price up to 315, 320. If it was a 4-bedroom, it'd bring it up some additional money. Kind of in looking at the comparables around it, all the homes around it are valued and this one's valued 246. Well, part of that has to do with the them missing information on this property.
Yeah.
You know, I would say it's a lot closer to this, to this 317 that the county has assessed it than what Redfin has it valued right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to trust one or the other, the county's information is going to be a lot easier to back up and is going to have real data behind it, versus the Redfin that, yeah, is probably going off of a lack of data, which is why it's showing it lower. Yeah, this property, if everything else is worth 350, then this property is probably going to be somewhere, somewhere close to that range. And 100,000 that they paid for it, they did really well too. They got it for a third of value as well.
Yeah, we'll look at one more and then we'll go ahead and throw it back. And there were so many others that we could have looked at. Let's see
Yeah.
where.
Oh, and yeah. So with the quiet title process here, yeah, you would wait until the deed, yeah, until they issue the deed to you. Essentially, once you've done that, then you don't really have to wait for anything else. But the other thing though is that the redemption period, a lot of times when you bought the property, they count the 6 months from the time of the foreclosure, and the foreclosure is happening before the auction takes place, and sometimes it's like a month or two before the auction takes place. And so a lot of times, it's not a full 6 months you're actually waiting. It's going to be less than that, because the foreclosure had already been conducted. But yeah, in fact, Greg is talking a little bit about going through, kind of quiet title actions in Michigan, and they can take some time to get done.
Yeah, definitely can definitely depend upon the state, how quick it is. This last property, they ended up paying up a little bit for this home. They ended up paying 139,000 for it. It opened up at 76. It has a county value of 365. And I'd have to do a little bit more research on this one, but I think that this one was underassessed as well through Redfin. And looking at kind of some of the sold comps, they seem to be a higher value, especially for a home that is, 5 bedroom, 2.5 bath. So I think that it's probably a little bit closer to the county and value of 360,000.
Which, I mean, there's $200,000 of potential profitability in that deal, which is as good as you could hope for or get. It doesn't look like it's that old of a property, so again, a lot of advantages there. It was built in the 90s.
I think it's actually older than that. I think it was built in the early 70s, late 60s.
Yeah. Well,
But
it's in.
it does look like like kind of like an 80s, 80s, 90s homes, the way it's kind of two-story like that with the pitch roof. But, part of that could be the newer siding and the, the new windows and things like that, where it has been upgraded since, it was originally built.
Yeah, it probably was remodeled at some point here, and vinyl windows were probably added to the property. So that's nice as well. That's something we're kind of looking at whenever we check out a property. We're looking at what its age is, and we're trying to figure out if the stuff we're looking at is original from when it was built, or if it's been remodeled since then and updated.